If you grew up in the United States, a good part of your schooling was probably dedicated towards reading and analyzing books that outdated you, and maybe even your parents, by a few decades. As a result, so many kids grow up in America learning to despise English class. But the fact is that the difference between the Gatsbys and the Hamlets and some of the great art that's released today is marginal at best. There's a lot of literary merit in the work that's widely consumed and relevant to our current cultural landscape. And sometimes the work that's released today can be even more impactful than the art of yesterday, because some of our modern experiences are best explained by the artists who were made by it. But to start, it can help to look at what made the art of the past so great. Anna Karenina is one of the most ambitious novels ever written, crafted by one of the most ambitious writers ever, Leo Tolstoy. The book follows Anna's affair with Count Vronsky, as well as the struggles held by her sister-in-law Dolly, her brother Steva, and most importantly for our sakes, the farmer named Levin. Levin's a simple man. He's not incredibly rich, he doesn't want to flex his strength or intelligence. He's a farmer, and he's in love with Dolly's sister, Kitty.
I'm too early. I'll come back.
This sets him starkly apart from the other men in the novel. So when I first read Anna Karenina, it was for a class. So once I finished it, I took my final and I headed off to winter break without considering what I'd read too heavily. Then, Pixar came out with a new movie. Whatever I was expecting, Pixar's Soul blew it out of the water. The fundamental conflict that artists face is to somehow unite the lanes of accessibility and complexity in a harmonic manner. And Pixar's been great at this for so long, getting kids to laugh while getting their parents to cry. But if we consider that fundamental conflict, I don't think they've done a better job than they have with Soul. Soul follows Joe Gardner, a middle school band instructor who's just gotten his big break in jazz music after years of toiling to get forward. Right as he's celebrating his stroke of achievement, though, he falls through a manhole and dies. The premise of Soul surrounds Joe trying to return to his human body, while 22, a free soul that doesn't have a human body, tries to evade any attempt to send them back to Earth. 22, like every other soul, is allowed to enter Earth once they find their spark, which Joe believes to be some sort of a purpose. But 22 doesn't find passion in anything they've encountered. They're indifferent towards all the sparks that seemingly resonate with their fellow souls. As a result, they're left in the great before. Joe is accidentally assigned to mentor 22, and a funny twist of fate, 22 ends up in Joe's body, while Joe ends up in a cat's body. The two navigate through Joe's world as he prepares for his big jazz performance, all while 22 learns the intricacies of the human world as a whole. 22's conflict is one that many of us can resonate with. They're told early on that they're to have a purpose, that there must be something that gives them meaning and keeps them moving forward. After all, it appears that everyone around them is easily able to declare what they want to pursue in their life from even before their birth. Meanwhile, they can't find passion in anything in a world where they've seen just about everything. How many of us have lived through those very concerns, to be told at 18 we're to decide what we want to do with our lives? The fear of choosing and watching our peers seemingly make their choices happily can be terrifying, existential even. But 22 meets Joe's friends, eats Joe's food, engages so beautifully with the most mundane of items, from the helicopter seeds that fall from the trees and the lollipop they suck on while getting a haircut. 22 finds unquantifiable beauty in looking at the sky and walking the streets of Harlem, things Joe would consider to be non-important details of life. But when Joe finally does figure out how to return to his body, 22 doesn't want to leave.
Truth is, I've always worried that maybe there's something wrong with me. You know? Maybe I'm not good enough for living. But then you showed me about purpose and passion, and maybe skywatching can be my spark. Or walking. I'm really good at walking.
Those really aren't purposes, 22. That's just regular old living.
What Joe doesn't recognize is that the emotions he has when playing his music are the same emotions 22 experiences when living those mundane aspects of life. But the fact of the matter is that 22's love for these things is what's important, not what it's defined as. The Jerrys, a group of counselors, tell Joe just as much when he demands of them what exactly it was that fulfilled 22's past.
We don't assign purposes. Where did you get that idea?
Because I have piano. It's what I was born to do. That's my spark.
A spark isn't a soul's purpose. Oh, you mentors and your passions, your purposes, your meanings of life. So basic.
Soul tells us that life isn't so narrow to be defined by one single purpose. We're broad people with broad passions and broad purposes. To live with the wonder and exhilaration that 22 lives with, we need to try to love the mundane, find beauty in the ordinary. When Joe discovers this at the film's close, there isn't any wordage that explains this to us. He simply sits in front of his piano and looks over the objects 22's collected. Joe moves to his piano and feels himself falling away into his art. He remembers teaching and feeling the water run over his feet when he's standing outside with his mother, biking through Harlem during a warm summer's day. And here's where we return to Anna Karenina. Because the foundation for the novel is this very idea of living simply for the sake of life. One of the greatest passages in the book, and for that matter all of literature, comes when Levin, the farmer, begins working alongside the peasants on his farm and harvesting his crops. The work is so taxing, requiring the utmost physical effort from Levin. But as he continues this motion of mowing and pulling back his scythe, he reaches a flow state, and truly begins to understand the happiness exhibited by his workers. They don't live a life that is considered valuable by the aristocracy that much of Anna Karenina surrounds, and yet they're some of the only characters in the book that are portrayed as living fulfilling lives. Anna herself engages in all the idiosyncratic behaviors of the wealthy and unfulfilled, which ends in the destruction of her marriage and ultimately her death. Conversely, Levin's sister-in-law Dolly is a mother whose husband is cheating on her, and yet, despite having every reason in her life to be disappointed, angry, spiteful, she lives a life of fulfillment. Her love for her children transcends any of her other emotions, and it's so full and powerful that it commands her to live her life for them, because she cares not for the large and the outlandish, but rather for the daily, everyday parts of life. Anna Karenina's namesake ends up not being the character who Tolstoy asks us to model. Tolstoy tells us it's not the ornate desires of the world that make life worth living. He asks us to love the everyday. He asks us to model the prosaic heroism of Dolly.
Why do they call it love? Because it's love.
But how do we apply this love of the everyday to our lives? Maybe Levin could go out and farm because he didn't have the distractions of social media, or having to go to school, or having to work a job that we hate. But a lot of us don't have that same luxury. Fleet Fox's 2011 song Helplessness Blues tries to tackle this very idea.
If I know only one thing, it's that everything that I see of the world outside is so inconceivable. Often I barely can speak. Yeah, I'm tongue-tied and dizzy, and I can't keep it to myself. What good is it to sing Helplessness Blues? Why should I wait for anyone else? And I know.
Here, lead singer Robin Pecknold outlines his admiration and astonishment with the world around him, with the beauty and the nature that he's confronted with. He sees so many possibilities that all he wants to do is interact with this beautiful world to its utmost capabilities, which he sings in the next line.
If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm wrong.
The similarities between the desire Pecknold expresses in those lines and Levin's love for the taxing work of harvesting in Anna Karenina are uncanny. Pecknold wants to derive fulfillment from the humble work of harvesting at an orchard, but the next line explains the difficulties in living like this in our modern world.
You would wait tables and soon run the store.
The you that Pecknold writes about appears to represent what he views as the everyman, who's simply trying to get ahead in the world. And here lies Pecknold's main conflict. He wants to be interacting with what truly gives him fulfillment in life, and yet he feels the tug of society trying to pull him on a path that makes it very difficult to do so. Our society doesn't necessarily allow for work for the sake of work. Life demands that we have a purpose, and if you aren't so lucky to discover what that purpose is, like 22, we're given one and told to strap on for the ride. It's incredibly difficult to embrace the truly fulfilling aspects of life if our material concerns are put first, and as a result, we lose our touch with that fulfillment. Pecknold doesn't write, "In my orchard I work till I'm sore." He writes, "If I had an orchard, I'd work till I'm sore." He simply can't do the mundane for the sake of the mundane. And yet, despite all that, despite a culture that's so heavily dependent on task A requiring outcome B, we still have those moments. When we're alone on a basketball court, we can't help but continue to pull back and shoot another shot, despite the fact that our legs are prepared to jelly out from beneath us and our chest is heaving uncontrollably. Haven't we all shared a moment with a friend where we simply sit in silence because the silence is so beautiful, because the two of you don't need to speak to savor each other's presence? These are the moments that the best of art tries to encapsulate. These experiences that transcend meaning and logic and simply pull us one step closer to the mystical beauty of the universe. We all have the songs, movies, or books that take us to a different place, regardless of what it is that the artist is saying or writing. The emotions that envelop us transcend any pragmatic explanation. With Soul, it wasn't just that I was so moved by its message. My real astonishment came in the fact that in 2020, a group of American screenwriters and animators could come to the same conclusions on life that Leo Tolstoy did over a century prior to them, seemingly independent of each other. The same is true of Helplessness Blues. These are emotions that we all feel, and needs that unite us as uniquely human. And the beautiful thing is that we have so many opportunities where we can find that beauty. We have our sacred spaces, whether they be the basketball courts or the working desk, the farm or the field, the back of car seats or behind the handlebars of a bicycle. We have inconceivably beautiful nature. And perhaps most exemplary, we have art. There seems to be a stigma across the academic community that art of the last decade cannot carry the same thematic and personal resonance that the great novels of yesterday did. But what I hope to do with this series is prove that it's not the case. We have so much art coming out today that is created by artists trying to recreate those beautiful emotions we've discussed. They may be coming out in different mediums, but they certainly hold weight. They certainly can change lives. I know they've changed mine.